Tonight, when they send me to your room, lock the door from inside. At dawn, I'm taking you out of this house.
Sofia Reyes stared at the youngest Huang brother while rain hammered the courtyard roof and angry footsteps gathered beyond her locked bedroom door. Kai was 31, 12 years younger than the man Sofia had married, and until that night, she had never completely trusted him. Trust had become dangerous inside the Huang house because every promise Sofia believed since leaving Mexico eventually became another invisible lock. Beyond the wooden door, four brothers argued with their mother about which man would control Sofia when the following week began. None of them knew Kai had stolen the truck keys, copied Sofia's passport, and hidden fuel beneath sacks of rice. By sunrise, Sofia would either reach the highway beyond the village or discover how much blood this family demanded for betrayal. 6 years earlier, she had not known four of those brothers existed, while Kai had been nothing more than a photograph. She believed she was marrying one quiet Chinese man who admired her strength and laughed whenever she teased his careful Spanish. She believed marriage would carry her across an ocean into another family, not erase her right to belong entirely to herself. If you are wondering how Sofia reached that locked room, stay with her, because the truth began long before that storm. If stories about dignity, survival, family, betrayal, and second chances matter to you, subscribe and stay with us. Tell us in the comments what city, state, or country you are watching from as we return to where everything began. To understand that stormy night in China, we must go back 6 years to the humid waterfront streets of Veracruz, Mexico. At 31, Sofia managed accounts for a modest waterfront hotel where tourists complained about views while fishermen counted every peso outside. Her grandmother taught her that numbers rarely lied, although people could arrange numbers carefully enough to hide almost anything. Sofia wore her grandmother's silver hummingbird necklace daily, touching its tiny wings whenever courage seemed farther away than she wanted. She had deep brown skin, shoulder-length black curls, observant dark eyes, and a habit of noticing details other people dismissed. That attention made Sofia excellent at accounting, particularly when suppliers hid inflated charges inside paperwork nobody else wanted to examine. Her work was ordinary, her apartment small, and her life stable enough that she had stopped expecting dramatic changes. Then Huang Jian arrived with 11 technicians whose shipping company contracted repairs near the commercial refrigeration terminal at Veracruz Harbor. Jian spoke careful Spanish, dressed simply, and returned to Sofia's reception desk each evening with questions he could answer himself. At first, Sofia assumed he was lonely because loneliness was easy to recognize in people living thousands of kilometers from home. He asked about Veracruz food, Mexican music, her curls, and why the hummingbird seemed older than everything else she wore. My grandmother said hummingbirds survive because they know when to fight the wind and when to disappear inside it. Sofia explained. Jian repeated the sentence carefully, then said, his mother believed endurance mattered more than happiness whenever families faced difficult circumstances. The answer should have troubled Sofia, but Jian delivered it with such sadness that she heard vulnerability instead of warning. During the following months, he brought coffee before her shifts and waited outside whenever the hotel closed after midnight. He never treated Sofia's Afro-Mexican heritage like a novelty, and he never seemed uncomfortable when strangers stared at them together. After relationships with men who admired her confidence until it challenged them, Jian's patient attention felt almost impossibly safe. He remembered which pastries she disliked, which cousin called every Sunday. And when her grandmother's death anniversary made Sofia quiet. When Jian's contract ended, he remained in Veracruz by accepting temporary work with another logistics company operating near the port. Sofia considered that decision romantic, never asking whether Jian had already decided something important before extending his stay. Their relationship developed slowly enough that her relatives stopped worrying and began treating the reserved Chinese man like another family guest. Jian learned to eat spicy seafood without coughing, while Sofia practiced Mandarin greetings that made him laugh at her stubborn pronunciation. One evening, Sofia asked why none of his brothers ever appeared during video calls with his parents back in China. Jian explained that 4 younger brothers lived near the family village, working farms, construction jobs, and irregular factory contracts. The house must be loud, Sofia joked. imagining 5 grown sons arguing around the same table every evening. Jian smiled strangely and answered that poverty sometimes made a crowded house feel much quieter than outsiders could ever understand. Several weeks later, he proposed beside the seawall during a summer storm, nearly dropping the ring from his rain-soaked fingers. Sofia laughed before saying yes, and Jian promised she would never face another difficult year completely by herself. Their civil wedding was small, attended by Sofia's cousins, hotel coworkers, and one Chinese business associate Jian knew from Veracruz. No Huang relatives attended, because Jian said his parents were elderly and international travel cost more than their yearly income. Sofia understood financial limitation, having grown up among people who measured love through sacrifices rather than expensive demonstrations. 3 months after the wedding, Jian received a message claiming his father collapsed while working the family's hillside land. "He wants to meet my wife before he dies," Jian said, holding his phone as though it carried unbearable weight. Sofia requested unpaid leave and ignored her cousin Marisol's concern about traveling somewhere she knew only through Jian's descriptions. "You know his family through photographs," Marisol warned. "That does not make them dangerous, but you still need to be careful." Sofia promised daily calls and lifted her hummingbird necklace, joking that her grandmother's stubborn courage would travel beside her. The journey lasted nearly 2 days, moving from airplane to train, then bus, then an aging van climbing narrow roads. Jian became quieter with every kilometer, answering Sofia's questions with shorter sentences, while phone service vanished among forested mountain ridges. She watched unfinished concrete houses appear beside older brick homes, while steep fields clung to slopes beneath drifting afternoon mist. By evening, their driver turned onto a muddy track. Sofia could not locate on the offline map saved to her phone. "How much farther?" she asked, forcing playfulness while another mountain ridge swallowed the final visible section of paved highway. "Home," Jian answered, although his expression resembled someone preparing for punishment rather than a man returning to family. The Wang house stood behind a stone wall near the upper edge of a village containing fewer than 60 visible homes. 5 men waited beneath the entrance awning, although Sofia recognized only Jian's gray-haired father from photographs displayed in Mexico. His mother approached first, touching Sofia's arms, cheeks, and curls with an inspection that immediately made Sofia step backward. Jian introduced his father, Shulin, then his mother, Meiyu, whose narrow smile never reached the lines surrounding her eyes. Only after entering the courtyard did Sofia realize the remaining 4 men were Jian's younger brothers standing silently together. Bo was broad and unsmiling. Qing watched everything. Ming repeatedly looked away, while Kai remained near the back staircase. Kai seemed different not because of his appearance, but because discomfort surfaced whenever Meiyu examined Sofia like merchandise. Sofia smiled politely toward him, and Kai returned a small nod before Jian said something sharp enough to silence everyone. That evening, the family prepared pork, vegetables, rice, wine, and more dishes than Sofia imagined the household normally afforded. She tried communicating through Jian, laughing whenever translation failed, but strange silences followed every question about the brothers' futures. Bo asked something while pointing toward Sofia, and 3 brothers exchanged brief expressions before Jian answered without meeting her eyes. "What did he ask?" Sofia whispered after Bo turned his attention toward another glass of rice wine. "He asked whether you want children," Jian replied, brushing his thumb across Sofia's hand beneath the old wooden table. Sofia smiled because they discussed children before, although she insisted they needed savings and their own home first. Jian translated her answer, and the table suddenly became louder, while Shulin poured another round for his adult sons. Only Kai remained quiet, staring into his bowl until Meiyu touched his shoulder and spoke in a commanding tone. Later, inside Jian's childhood bedroom, Sofia finally admitted that his family's attention had made her profoundly uncomfortable. "They watch me like they are waiting for something," Sofia said while removing the earrings she wore for dinner. "They have never hosted a foreign guest," Jian answered. "You are different from anyone who has entered this house." "Different can mean interesting," Sofia replied. "Tonight it felt like your family was evaluating whether I met some requirement." Jian kissed her forehead and promised everything would feel normal after several days, once his relatives adjusted to her presence. The following morning, Sofia reached for her passport pouch and discovered the zipped compartment inside her suitcase completely empty. Her passport, Mexican identification, spare bank card, emergency cash, and printed return itinerary had vanished during the night. Jian appeared concerned, opening drawers and searching luggage while Sofia checked the same compartments repeatedly with increasingly cold hands. Then she noticed he never asked whether somebody inside the house might have entered their room and taken everything. "Jian, there are 7 other people living here," Sofia said carefully. "Ask your family who touched my suitcase." His hand stopped above an open drawer, and the chickens scratching below suddenly sounded unbearably loud. "My father keeps important documents downstairs," Jian finally answered. "Maybe my mother moved them so they would remain safe." Sofia stared at him. How could your mother protect something she did not know existed inside a zipped suitcase? Jian walked toward the window rather than answering, creating the first serious fracture inside Sofia's understanding of their marriage. She followed him downstairs and demanded her documents while Mayu continued chopping vegetables without displaying surprise or concern. Shulin drank tea at the kitchen table while Chiang and Bo remained nearby, watching Sofia more carefully than before. Jian translated something from his father, then explained that the family safe was more secure than an unlocked guest room. "Then open the safe and return my passport," Sofia answered. "After that, we can call this a misunderstanding." Shulin responded before Jian translated, but Sofia recognized the refusal because Jian taught her that Mandarin word months earlier. Nobody moved afterward, and Sofia immediately understood everyone except her had expected the answer before she entered the kitchen. She turned toward Jian, waiting for anger or embarrassment, proving his father's decision shocked him as well. Instead, Jian lowered his eyes toward the table, and his silence frightened Sofia more deeply than Shulin's refusal. For the first time, she understood Jian was not standing beside her against the family gathering around them. He stood between Sofia and them, but she could no longer determine which direction her husband truly faced. Sofia demanded to leave, yet Mayu stepped between her and the courtyard gate with surprising speed and determination. Bo moved beside his mother, while Chiang calmly reached behind Sofia and pushed the heavy iron bolt into place. "Tell them to move," Sofia ordered, looking directly at Jian while her pulse hammered beneath the hummingbird necklace. Jian swallowed, glanced toward his father, then whispered something Sofia could barely hear across the increasingly crowded courtyard. "My father paid debts connected to our marriage," he said, choosing each Spanish word as though accuracy could soften meaning. Sofia almost laughed because the sentence made no sense within anything Jian previously told her about their wedding. "What debts?" she asked, but Jian looked toward his brothers before answering as though permission belonged to them. "All of us contributed," Jian admitted, and the courtyard suddenly seemed much smaller around Sofia's motionless body. She looked from Jian to Bo, Chiang, Ming, and finally Kai, who immediately turned his face toward the floor. "Contributed to what?" Sofia demanded, realizing everyone understood the question even without Jian translating her furious Spanish. Shulin opened a wooden cabinet beside the kitchen and removed a red notebook filled with folded receipts and handwritten calculations. Ching placed the ledger before Sofia and pointed toward columns containing numbers, followed by 5 separate male names. Sofia recognized Jian immediately, then remembered hearing the names of his 4 brothers during introductions the previous evening. 5 sons, 5 columns, and 1 total had been circled repeatedly in red ink near the bottom. For months, Jian told Sofia his brothers helped repay medical debts created by Shulin's health and weak harvests. The notebook suggested something else had been divided among them, something costly enough to require contributions from every adult son. Sofia touched the wedding ring on her finger and suddenly felt as though she were wearing evidence instead of jewelry. "What did you pay for?" she asked, watching Jian's face while the remaining Huang family members stood completely silent. Jian did not answer, but Bo began speaking rapidly while pointing first at Jian, then himself, Chiang, Ming, and Kai. When Bo's hand reached the youngest brother, Kai pushed it away and answered with sudden anger Sofia had not expected. The brothers argued until Mayu struck the table with her palm, silencing everyone except Sofia's increasingly uneven breathing. "Translate what he said," Sofia demanded, refusing Jian's attempt to guide her away from the crowded kitchen table. Jian shook his head, but Sofia stepped closer and repeated the demand until avoiding her became impossible. "My family has 5 sons," Jian finally whispered, and Sofia waited because that fact alone explained absolutely nothing. "There is not enough money for 5 marriages," he continued, staring somewhere beyond Sofia instead of meeting her eyes. "That is not my problem," Sofia answered, already sensing the approaching truth before he found courage to say it. "My father believes the family line cannot disappear," Jian said, while Shulin remained seated like a judge awaiting obedience. Sofia folded her arms. "Your father can believe anything he wants. None of this explains why he stole my passport." Jian closed his eyes briefly before forcing himself to explain what the red ledger had been created to record. "They believe one wife can give the family children," he said, and every sound inside the courtyard seemed to stop. Sofia stared at him while the meaning rearranged everything she understood about their courtship, wedding, and journey into the mountains. "One wife for whom?" she asked. Although Jian's silence already contained the answer, she desperately wanted to be wrong. "For the family," Jian whispered, and Sofia struck him across the face before anyone could step between them. The sound snapped across the courtyard, startling birds from the roof while every Huang brother froze where he stood. Jian did not defend himself, and Sofia struck him again before Bo moved forward with anger across his face. Kai stepped between them immediately, blocking Bo with his shoulder while speaking in rapid Mandarin Sofia could not understand. That was the first time Kai protected Sofia, and it was also the first time she hated him for not doing more. She ran toward the courtyard gate, but Chiang reached the iron bolt first and blocked the doors without touching her. Sofia screamed for help in Spanish, English, and every Mandarin word she remembered from Jian's casual lessons in Mexico. Outside the gate, somebody paused, and Sofia heard footsteps stop close enough that another person had certainly heard her. Shulin called through the wood, a man answered, and several calm sentences passed before the footsteps continued downhill. Sofia pounded the gate with both hands until Jian grabbed her wrists, causing her to twist violently away. "Do not touch me," Sofia warned, using a tone Jian had never heard during their entire relationship. He released her immediately, but the gesture meant nothing while her passport remained locked somewhere inside his father's house. "Give me my passport and phone," Sofia demanded. "If you ever loved me, open this gate and let me leave." Jian glanced toward Shulin before answering, and that tiny movement told Sofia everything another hour of explanation could not. The man she married feared his father, but he was willing to make Sofia pay the price for that fear. The family locked Sofia inside Jian's upstairs room while he remained outside, pretending his presence somehow protected her. Whenever Sofia demanded freedom, Jian repeated that his relatives needed time to calm down and accept her unfamiliar expectations. By sunset, she understood that calm down meant surrender, and surrender was exactly what the Huang family expected. Instead of crying until exhaustion defeated her, Sofia examined every corner of the room for anything that could become useful. 2 barred windows overlooked the courtyard, while the single wooden door opened toward a hallway creaking beneath almost every footstep. An old wardrobe contained clothing, blankets, sewing supplies, and 1 broken metal clasp Sofia quietly hid beneath her mattress. Sofia found 2 long sewing pins inside Mayu's basket and concealed them within the folded hem of her shirt. Her grandmother taught her accounting, bargaining, cooking, and how to recognize when fear wanted permission to become helplessness. Fear could exist without controlling her, so Sofia decided she would learn everything possible before attempting anything reckless. That evening, Jian entered carrying rice, vegetables, and tea, placing the tray beside Sofia without approaching her bed. "My father thinks you will understand eventually," he explained, and Sofia stared at him as though facing a stranger. "Understand what?" she asked. "That your family kidnapped me after you convinced me to travel here willingly?" "You are my wife," Jian answered, revealing how completely his understanding of marriage changed after leaving Mexico. "I was your wife," Sofia replied. "You stopped being my husband when you helped them take away my freedom." Jian flinched, and Sofia discovered his pain no longer created even a trace of sympathy inside her. "I did not steal your passport," he insisted, But Sofia immediately asked the question he had been avoiding. "How long did you know what they expected after bringing me into this house?" Sofia asked, watching his expression collapse. Jian remained silent long enough that Sofia understood the answer before he finally admitted knowing before their wedding. The confession was worse than anything Shulin said because it turned months of tenderness into evidence requiring complete reconsideration. "You knew before you proposed beside the seawall," Sofia said, and Jian lowered his head without attempting another denial. "You studied my family, my finances, and how many people would notice if I disappeared somewhere far from home." Jian insisted that he genuinely loved her, but Sofia recognized love without respect had become another excuse for possession. "You do not get to be heartbroken by what you did," Sofia told him while pushing the untouched food away. Outside the bedroom, floorboards creaked, and Jian opened the door to find Kai standing several meters down the hallway. The younger brother glanced at Sofia, then at Jian, before speaking quietly enough that Sofia could not understand anything. Jian answered sharply, but Kai remained calm until his eldest brother finally stepped aside and allowed him to pass. "What did he say?" Sofia asked after Kai disappeared downstairs, expecting Jian to refuse another uncomfortable translation. "He said you were right," Jian admitted, and Sofia remained awake for the entire night thinking about those words. She counted footsteps instead of sleeping, recording mentally who crossed the hallway, when doors opened, and when water buckets returned. Mayu passed twice before midnight, while Qing crossed once and somebody unlocked the courtyard shortly before sunrise. The person remained outside approximately 11 minutes before returning with water, suggesting the family well stood beyond the walls. Patterns mattered because people controlling others became careless once they believed those people had stopped thinking for themselves. Sofia had not stopped thinking, and she intended to make the family's confidence more dangerous than her own fear. For 3 days, she refused most food until dizziness convinced her weakening herself would only strengthen the people guarding her. She began eating again, not as surrender, but because escape required a body capable of surviving whatever opportunity eventually appeared. Sofia also began learning Mandarin by pointing toward objects whenever Mayu entered with meals or clean clothing. Door, window, water, road, market, bus, police, hospital, money, telephone, and home became the first words she memorized. Mayu seemed amused by Sofia's effort, apparently assuming language would make the foreign woman easier for the household to manage. Sofia encouraged that misunderstanding by deliberately mispronouncing words she already knew whenever other family members listened. Within several weeks, she understood enough household Mandarin to recognize when conversations changed because she entered the room. She also learned the brothers' work schedules, which neighbors visited regularly, and which nights Shulin drank enough rice wine to sleep heavily. The first truly terrifying discovery came when Sofia overheard Mayu discussing a weekly arrangement involving the names of all 5 sons. Jian's name came first, followed by Bo, Qiang, Ming, and finally Kai, each associated with different nights. Sofia did not require perfect Mandarin to understand a calendar containing 5 male names and a single locked bedroom. She reached the washing area before becoming sick, then remained there until her shaking hands could grip the basin again. The schedule became real without anyone needing to explain it, because certain evenings brought different footsteps towards Sofia's locked room. She learned to recognize Bo's heavy pace, Chiang's deliberate silence, Ming's nervous hesitation, and Jian's habit of stopping outside first. What happened behind that door was rarely discussed afterward, because silence was another tool the household used against Sofia. She measured those nights through ceilings, footsteps, darkness, and the moment morning finally reached the bars outside her window. Kai's assigned nights were different, because he entered carrying tea or blankets, locked the door, and remained across the room. Sometimes he slept on the floor while Sofia stayed awake, both pretending the family's arrangement had been obeyed without discussion. Those nights became the only evenings Sofia did not dread sunset, although she refused to mistake Kai's restraint for innocence. Every morning Mayu inspected Sofia's face, bedding, appetite, and mood with the same cold attention she gave livestock. Sofia eventually understood Mayu was not merely watching obedience, she was searching for the earliest signs of pregnancy. A small calendar appeared beside the kitchen cabinet, marked with symbols. Sofia gradually learned to connect with her body. Nothing inside the Huang household was private anymore, not sleep, menstruation, illness, grief, or the possibility of becoming pregnant. Sofia began counting her own days separately, keeping the numbers inside memory because anything written could be discovered. When her cycle arrived late, she told nobody and spent 4 mornings hoping stress had simply confused her body. On the 5th morning, nausea came before breakfast, and Mayu noticed Sofia gripping the edge of the kitchen table. The older woman's expression transformed instantly, not into concern, but into satisfaction. Sofia found more frightening than anger. By afternoon, Shulin had sent Kai for a pregnancy test, while Chiang opened the red ledger beside the family table. Sofia watched 5 men discuss dates, while realizing the pregnancy growing inside her had already become another accounting problem. Nobody asked whether she wanted a child under these circumstances, or whether she could emotionally survive becoming a mother there. Jian tried touching her shoulder that evening, but Sofia stepped away before his hand could reach her sweater. "This is not proof our marriage survived," she told him. "It proves your family succeeded in taking another choice." Jian whispered that a baby might eventually bring peace, revealing how desperately he wanted consequences to become forgiveness. Sofia answered that children were not medicine for betrayal, and motherhood would never erase what happened inside the house. The clinic confirmed the pregnancy several weeks later, while Mayu remained close enough to control every conversation with medical staff. Sofia attempted telling a nurse she was being held without her passport, using Mandarin sentences rehearsed repeatedly in secret. The nurse looked unsettled and asked another question, but Mayu entered before Sofia could finish describing the locked gate. On the drive home, Mayu slapped Sofia once and warned that embarrassing the family would make everything harder. Sofia did not cry until darkness, when she realized even pregnancy had failed to make outsiders see someone needing protection. Kai found her sitting behind the storage shed, knees drawn against her chest while winter wind moved through the courtyard. "I thought a clinic would be different," Sofia admitted. "I thought people wearing uniforms would have to listen." Kai remained several feet away and answered, "They heard you. They simply chose the easier version of what happened." His words hurt because they were true, and because Sofia had once accused Kai of making that same choice. As the pregnancy advanced, the Huang family treated Sofia more carefully, but their kindness always carried ownership underneath it. Mayu brought better food. Shulin reduced Sofia's chores, and Jian began behaving like a husband, expecting ordinary domestic happiness. Sofia hated how easily captivity could imitate care whenever captors became interested in protecting something they considered valuable. At night, she spoke softly to the unborn child, promising the baby would never become merely another ledger entry. She did not know whether that promise was possible, but speaking it separated motherhood from what the family demanded. During the 7th month, Sofia overheard Chiang arguing with Bo over which brother would receive formal recognition for the child. Their dispute concerned inheritance and family status, not affection, responsibility, or the person their decisions had forced into motherhood. Sofia stood behind the kitchen wall listening while her daughter's future was assigned through calculations made before birth. That evening she asked Jian whether he understood how completely his family had turned children into property. Jian insisted the village survived through arrangements outsiders would never understand, repeating language Sofia had already heard from Shulin. "You lived in Mexico," Sofia reminded him. "You understood exactly what choice meant before you brought me here." Jian left without answering, and Sofia understood knowledge had never been his problem. Courage was always the missing piece. Labor began during a summer storm, with contractions arriving hours before the family's aging van could safely descend the mountain. Sofia spent most of the night walking upstairs while Mayu timed contractions and shouted instructions through the doorway. Fear sharpened when Sofia realized the family might attempt delivery inside the house rather than risk the flooded roads. She demanded the clinic repeatedly until Kai confronted Shulin and insisted further delay could endanger mother and child. The argument lasted 20 minutes before Jian joined Kai, not from courage alone, but because Sofia's pain overwhelmed his obedience. They reached the township clinic shortly before dawn, after the van slid twice across mud covering the mountain road. Sofia entered labor, surrounded by people whose language she barely understood, with Mayu answering questions doctors directed toward her. Whenever Sofia could speak, she repeated her own name, forcing medical staff to address the woman giving birth. Hours later, exhaustion blurred the room until one furious newborn cry cut through every voice surrounding the bed. Sofia saw her daughter only briefly before Mayu reached forward, but Sofia pulled the baby against her chest first. Elena, Sofia whispered, choosing the name before anyone could transform that first moment into another family decision. Mayu objected immediately, insisting Shulin prepared a Chinese name connected with ancestry and the Huang family line. Sofia repeated Elena louder, then repeated it again until the nurse finally wrote the name beside the infant's record. That small victory exhausted almost everything Sofia had left, yet she held Elena as though the child anchored her. Back at the village, Shulin celebrated the birth while Qing entered medical expenses and dates into the red ledger. Sofia later discovered another notation beside Elena's birth, identifying Jian legally while leaving space for an internal family designation. The blank space horrified her because it proved the household still intended to decide which brother could claim the child. Motherhood did not soften Sofia toward her captors. Instead, it created another person whose freedom she now had to protect. Escape became more complicated because Sofia refused to abandon Elena, even when running alone would have been infinitely easier. For several months, Sofia slept with the baby against her chest whenever footsteps moved along the hallway after dark. Mayu repeatedly reminded her that another pregnancy would be expected once Elena became old enough to sleep without nursing. The warning turned recovery into another countdown, denying Sofia even the illusion that childbirth purchased temporary ownership of herself. Kai quietly brought vitamins from town and learned to prepare formula when exhaustion made feeding Elena more difficult. He never entered without knocking after Elena's birth, even when the family insisted the room belonged to the household. Sofia noticed those details while refusing to let kindness erase the fact that Kai still belonged to the system. Almost a year after Elena's birth, Mayu returned the old calendar to the kitchen wall and began marking nights again. Sofia saw the symbols and understood her body had been declared available by people who never asked whether she healed. The first time she suspected another pregnancy, Sofia sat alone beside the water pump until darkness covered the courtyard. She felt dread followed immediately by guilt because the unborn child had done nothing to deserve her fear. Kai found her there and understood before Sofia explained, but wisely avoided offering reassurance he could not guarantee. "I cannot do this forever," Sofia whispered. "They are counting sons, daughters, land, and names like none of us are people." Kai answered that Shulin had spoken openly about giving every brother a descendant before the old man died. That revelation transformed Sofia's fear into something colder because she finally understood the intended length of her captivity. The second pregnancy ended before the fourth month, beginning with pain Sofia concealed until she nearly collapsed beside the kitchen. At the clinic, doctors confirmed the pregnancy had been lost, while Sofia stared upward, unable to decide what grief meant. She mourned the child, hated the circumstances, felt guilty for moments of relief, then hated herself for feeling guilty. Mayu responded by asking the physician when Sofia could safely become pregnant again before Sofia had even left the bed. Kai heard the question and walked outside because remaining in the clinic would have ended with another family confrontation. Sofia remained completely still, realizing the Huang family had transformed even miscarriage into a temporary interruption of their plan. For several weeks afterward, she spoke only when necessary and moved through the house as though observing herself from afar. Jian called her grief excessive, saying they could eventually have another baby, and Sofia understood how little he recognized. "It was not a failed attempt," Sofia told him. "It was my child, and you will never speak that way again." Jian apologized, but Sofia had begun measuring apologies by what changed afterward, and nothing inside him changed enough. The miscarriage became a turning point because Sofia stopped hoping the family might eventually become tired of controlling her. They would continue until age, illness, escape, or death made their arrangement impossible, unless Sofia ended it herself. She started preparing more seriously, studying hinges, locks, roads, household routines, and every moment the courtyard became temporarily unwatched. Her first escape attempt came during a village funeral that drew nearly every household downhill for an entire afternoon. Mayu left Sofia cleaning vegetables while believing Bo remained nearby, unaware he had gone drinking with several cousins. Sofia used one hidden sewing pin to work the old gate latch through a narrow opening beside the frame. It took 23 minutes before the metal shifted, and Sofia nearly cried when the gate opened several centimeters. She wrapped Elena against her body, carried no luggage, and stepped outside wearing borrowed shoes and her hummingbird necklace. The mountain road descended through terraced fields before dividing beside a concrete irrigation channel Sofia recognized from arrival. She chose the wider path because truck tracks suggested regular traffic, then walked quickly without running to avoid attention. For almost 40 minutes, nobody followed, and Sofia began believing escape might succeed through nothing more complicated than persistence. Then a motorcycle appeared behind her, carrying Ming and one of Shulin's nephews from another household nearby. Sofia left the road and pushed through wet cornfields while the motorcycle engine disappeared and returned along another path. With Elena crying against her chest, Sofia reached several houses and begged an older man to call police. The man understood enough to hesitate, but Ming arrived moments later and explained something that transformed concern into immediate avoidance. Sofia later learned the family told villagers she suffered emotional illness and sometimes wandered away without understanding her surroundings. Ming never struck her while bringing her back, yet that restraint made the situation feel even more organized. Inside the courtyard, Shulin ordered the gate reinforced, while Mayu removed Sofia's borrowed shoes and locked them downstairs. Jian tried apologizing, but Sofia asked whether he helped create the story, claiming his wife was mentally unstable. His failure to answer confirmed another betrayal, and Sofia stopped speaking to him, except when survival required communication. That night, Kai slid a folded piece of paper beneath Sofia's door after the household finally became quiet. The paper contained a hand-drawn map showing Sofia's wrong turn and another route leading toward the weekly bus. At the bottom, Kai wrote 2 English words Sofia immediately understood, "Not yet." She stared at the map before hiding it inside the mattress lining where Cheung rarely searched. Kai was asking her to wait, but Sofia refused to confuse his caution with authority over her decisions. The next morning, she confronted him beside the water pump where conversation could hide beneath metal buckets. "You do not decide when I escape," Sofia whispered, keeping her expression neutral while Mayu worked nearby. Kai answered that he understood, but the road Sofia needed was watched whenever the family suspected she might run. "Then help me change what they suspect," Sofia replied, creating the first deliberate plan they developed together. For the next several months, Sofia stopped openly resisting every instruction and allowed the family to believe exhaustion defeated her. She cooked when asked, carried water, cared for Elena, and avoided approaching the gate whenever Shulin watched. The performance cost Sofia emotionally because cooperation made Jian believe forgiveness might eventually become possible between them. He started bringing small gifts and speaking about returning to Mexico someday, provided Sofia first fulfilled his father's expectations. Sofia listened without arguing, allowing Jian to reveal more whenever he mistook silence for emotional surrender. Through those conversations, she learned the Red Ledger tracked contributions, debts, property shares, and inheritance for every son. The family considered children part of that accounting, assigning responsibilities and future land rights according to agreements recorded by Ching. Sofia understood the ledger was more than bookkeeping. It documented how completely the household converted people into assets. She wanted that ledger almost as much as her passport, because freedom without evidence might let Jian rewrite everything. Kai warned that stealing it too early would expose them, so Sofia began memorizing pages whenever Chiang left it unattended. Her accounting background became the family's greatest mistake, because Sofia remembered columns, totals, dates, and inconsistencies almost automatically. She discovered payments made to an intermediary months before Jian first appeared at the Veracruz hotel. One payment matched the exact month Jian requested his original overseas assignment through the shipping company. Another appeared shortly before Jian extended his contract instead of returning home when the repair project ended. Sofia stared at those dates and understood her marriage had not merely become exploitation after reaching China. Someone had planned the possibility before Jian ever asked about the hummingbird necklace at the hotel reception desk. When she quietly confronted Kai, he seemed genuinely shocked and demanded to see the entries himself. Sofia refused to reveal her access, instead reciting the amounts and dates from memory while Kai listened. He later confirmed Xiang borrowed money from several relatives before Jian traveled abroad for the first time. The discovery damaged Kai's remaining loyalty because his brothers apparently concealed how deliberately Sofia had been targeted. Kai knew Shulin wanted one household wife because separate marriages seemed financially impossible, but he believed Jian chose Sofia independently. Learning money and strategy preceded the relationship forced Kai to confront how carefully his family engineered Sofia's vulnerability. Sofia did not comfort him because his disillusionment remained smaller than the life she had lost. Instead, she told Kai guilt mattered only if it changed what somebody was willing to risk afterward. He remembered those words, and they became the standard Sofia used to measure every promise he later made. Winter arrived early, covering higher roads with ice and reducing the village's contact with surrounding towns. The cold made escape harder, but it also gave Kai reasons to spend more time repairing heaters indoors. He began teaching Sofia written Chinese symbols whenever they could safely sit together without attracting suspicion. Sofia taught him Spanish in return, partly because the exchange looked harmless whenever Jian overheard their conversations. Their lessons never began romantically. They grew from necessity, mutual observation, and the strange intimacy created by shared danger. Kai learned Sofia hated sweet tea, loved old bolero songs, and calculated expenses whenever anxiety made her restless. Sofia learned Kai repaired motorcycles, disliked Shulin's drinking, and once intended to move permanently to Guangzhou. He had returned after Shulin injured his leg, expecting several months at home before discovering the full arrangement. Sofia challenged him whenever he compared his family pressure with her captivity, reminding Kai he always possessed the ability to leave. Kai agreed and never again described his situation as though their losses carried equal weight. That willingness to be corrected slowly distinguished him from Jian, who transformed every accusation into an argument about intentions. Sofia's third pregnancy began the following year, after months remembered through weather, locked doors, and Elena learning new words. This time Sofia told herself loving the child and hating the circumstances were truths capable of existing together. She refused to let Mayu attend every medical appointment, creating arguments so public the clinic staff could no longer ignore them. During one appointment, Sofia demanded a nurse record her request to speak privately without any Huang relative present. The nurse hesitated, then finally sent Mayu outside, giving Sofia 7 uninterrupted minutes with another adult. Sofia explained the passport, gate, family schedule, miscarriage, and her fear that the children would be withheld. The nurse listened carefully, wrote something down, and promised to ask a supervisor what options legally existed. Nothing immediate happened, but the simple act of being documented gave Sofia a form of hope she almost forgot. Weeks later, Shulin discovered somebody from the clinic telephoned Jian asking questions about Sofia's immigration documents. The family reacted by changing clinics and restricting Sofia's movements, confirming her private conversation had frightened them. That consequence taught Sofia something important. Even failed attempts created pressure when information reached outside the village. Her son arrived after a difficult labor, with Sofia exhausted enough that Kai donated blood when complications developed. When the nurse placed the baby beside her, Sofia named him Mateo before anyone asked which Huang brother would claim him. Shulin protested again, but Sofia threatened to tell every patient in the clinic exactly why he objected. For once, the old man retreated because public attention frightened him more than Sofia's private resistance ever had. Back home, Chiang created another ledger entry and began debating Mateo's future inheritance with Bo and Jian. Sofia listened from the hallway while holding her newborn son, feeling anger slowly replace the exhaustion inside her chest. She realized survival alone was no longer enough. If she escaped, she wanted evidence capable of explaining everything afterward. The red ledger stopped being merely a symbol of humiliation and became the most important document Sofia intended to steal. From then onward, every pregnancy record, medical receipt, payment, brother's name, and household calculation became something she memorized deliberately. Sofia began treating the family's cruelty like an audit, because numbers were the language she understood long before Mandarin. She found contradictions linking travel payments to Jian's Mexico assignment and expenses recorded before he ever proposed marriage. She discovered medical costs listed beside projected inheritance shares, revealing how Shulin calculated children before they were even born. Most painful were the empty rows waiting beneath Elena and Mateo, spaces prepared for future children Sofia never agreed to bear. One evening, Sofia stared at those blank lines until she understood they represented the future the Huang family expected. She closed the ledger and decided no third surviving child would ever have a name written inside those spaces. That decision did not open the gate, but it changed how Sofia approached every remaining day inside the house. She stopped measuring time by how much suffering she could endure and began measuring what information each day provided. Every bottle prepared for Mateo, every walk with Elena, and every chore became another chance to study weaknesses. She memorized keys, roads, telephone numbers, relatives, medical records, truck fuel levels, and the exact location of her passport. Kai noticed Sofia becoming quieter and initially feared the years had finally broken something inside her beyond repair. Instead, Sofia showed him 3 ledger totals she memorized and explained exactly how the payments connected to Jian's travel. Kai stared at the figures until his expression changed, realizing Sofia discovered evidence even he had never understood. "This is how we leave," Sofia told him. "Not just through the gate, we leave with enough truth." From that moment, childbirth stopped being only the deepest evidence of Sofia's captivity and became part of the case. Elena and Mateo were not proof the Huang system succeeded. They became the reason Sofia refused to let it continue. Over the following 2 years, the household settled into a dangerous routine while Sofia turned every changing season into preparation. Mateo's first year gave the family another false sense of security because traveling secretly with 2 children seemed almost impossible. Shulin increasingly believed motherhood anchored Sofia more effectively than locks, allowing her short, supervised walks through nearby fields. Every additional meter became information, and Sofia gradually mapped the valley through drainage channels, sheds, trails, and telephone poles. Kai added details only when requested, respecting Sofia's insistence that the escape plan remain hers rather than becoming another command. Their relationship changed almost invisibly, not through declarations, but through the accumulation of choices made when nobody rewarded them. Kai began leaving Sofia the better flashlight before storms, knowing power failures frightened Elena more than darkness frightened adults. When Sofia became ill, he watched both children outside rather than entering her room and assuming help gave him access. When Bo mocked Sofia's accent during dinner, Kai corrected his brother's Mandarin instead of translating the insult for entertainment. None of those gestures erased the years he remained silent, and Sofia never allowed either of them to pretend otherwise. Kai never asked for forgiveness, which slowly made forgiveness seem less like another obligation Sofia was expected to perform. Their first genuine argument happened after Kai secretly moved the escape phone without telling Sofia where he hid it. He believed Chiang was searching storage rooms, but Sofia became furious because access to communication represented control over her future. "You moved the only telephone that belongs to my plan and decided I did not need to know," she told him. Kai initially defended the decision as necessary, then stopped when he recognized how closely his reasoning resembled Jian's old explanations. He apologized, showed Sofia the new hiding place, and promised never again to protect her by removing information. That correction mattered more than romantic words because Sofia saw Kai learning the difference between protection and control. Several months later, Elena developed a dangerous fever during a winter night when the family truck refused to start. Jian argued with Shulin about treatment costs while Mayu insisted they could wait until morning for the village practitioner. Kai wrapped Elena inside blankets and began walking toward the township clinic without asking anybody's permission. Sofia followed carrying Mateo, while the remaining family shouted behind them until darkness swallowed the courtyard. They walked nearly 3 kilometers through snow before a passing farm vehicle finally carried them the remaining distance. At the clinic, Kai handed Elena to Sofia and clearly told staff her mother would make every medical decision. The sentence was ordinary, yet Sofia nearly cried because nobody inside the Huang family publicly recognized her authority before. Elena recovered after 2 nights, and Sofia returned with a new understanding of what Kai was willing to risk. Her trust remained conditional, but the conditions were changing because his actions increasingly matched the values he claimed. Bo noticed that change too and began accusing Kai of behaving like Sofia's servant whenever the brothers argued. Kai usually ignored him until Bo suggested Sofia would abandon everyone the moment she regained her passport. She should, Kai answered one evening, speaking loudly enough that Sofia understood from the hallway. The room fell silent because none of the Huang brothers had ever openly acknowledged Sofia possessed the right to leave. Shulin responded by striking Kai across the face, and Kai accepted the blow without withdrawing the statement. Afterward, Sofia found him washing blood from his lip beside the outdoor tap and offered a clean cloth. It was the first time she voluntarily approached Kai with care rather than information, necessity, or suspicion. Neither mentioned what the gesture meant, because naming it too early would have made everything inside their captivity more dangerous. Sofia refused to build romance while she remained trapped within Kai's family and dependent on his cooperation. Kai appeared to understand without discussion, and his restraint became more meaningful than any confession he could have offered. The next stage of their escape depended on communication, because Sofia needed someone outside the village expecting them. Kai obtained a cheap second-hand telephone through a repair customer and hid it inside a hollow storage wall. The device had no reliable signal inside the courtyard, but certain mountain ridges received service during clear weather. Sofia memorized Marisol's number repeatedly, terrified trauma might erase the sequence when opportunity finally appeared. For weeks they studied where signals appeared while pretending their walks concerned herbs, children, or damaged irrigation pipes. One northern ridge offered the best chance, but reaching it required crossing land visible from Shulin's relatives. Sofia waited until a village festival created enough movement for her absence to appear temporarily unremarkable. She carried Mateo against her back while Elena walked beside Kai, pretending they were gathering wild plants near terraces. At the ridge, Kai remained downhill while Sofia climbed alone with the hidden phone trembling inside her jacket. One signal bar appeared, vanished, then returned strongly enough for Sofia to dial the number memorized for years. Marisol answered after 4 rings, and Sofia could not speak because hearing familiar Spanish nearly broke her composure. "Sofia?" Marisol finally whispered, recognizing the breathing before Sofia managed to say her cousin's name. Sofia told her she was alive, trapped in rural China, and needed Marisol to write everything without interruption. The call lasted 6 minutes before signal weakened, yet Sofia provided names, approximate location, passport details, and family information. She warned Marisol not to contact Jian because any sign of outside attention could cause the family to move her. Marisol cried silently enough that Sofia heard only fragments, then promised to contact Mexican authorities immediately. Before disconnecting, Sofia made her cousin repeat one sentence. "I know where to start looking for you." Those words became the first external proof that the Huang family no longer controlled every part of Sofia's existence. For the following month, nothing happened, and uncertainty became almost harder to endure than the years before making contact. Sofia could not know whether Marisol reached anyone capable of helping or whether bureaucracy swallowed another desperate report. Kai urged patience, but Sofia reminded him every additional day increased the chance Chang discovered missing photographs. During that period, Sofia finally obtained clearer access to the red ledger after Chiang began trusting her apparent resignation. She photographed page after page while Kai stood outside pretending to repair a broken electrical connection. The records included debts, transportation payments, medical costs, land shares, and household agreements spanning almost a decade. Several older entries suggested Shulin had explored purchasing or arranging another bride before Jian ever traveled abroad. Sofia felt sick reading them, because her captivity appeared not as one family's sudden desperation, but a project repeatedly discussed. She copied everything possible, knowing some entries might mean something different, but refusing to let uncertainty destroy evidence. One afternoon, Jian unexpectedly entered while Sofia held the ledger open beside an old storage cabinet. For several seconds, they stared at each other, both understanding what he had discovered without speaking. Sofia expected Jian to call Qing or Shulin, but he quietly closed the door behind himself instead. "You have been reading that," Jian said in Spanish, his voice carrying more exhaustion than anger. "I have been reading my life as your family recorded it," Sofia answered without closing the book. Jian told her she misunderstood some entries, yet he could not explain why payments preceded his original trip to Mexico. Sofia asked directly whether finding a wife had influenced his decision to accept the Veracruz assignment. Jian denied traveling specifically to find Sofia, but admitted Shulin repeatedly told him not to return without possibilities. The distinction sounded meaningful only to Jian, because Sofia heard confirmation that their courtship was never completely innocent. "You might have fallen in love with me," Sofia said, "but you still knew what home expected before asking me to marry." Jian sat down as though standing required more strength than he possessed after hearing the truth stated plainly. He claimed he believed his father would abandon the shared arrangement after seeing Sofia and understanding their marriage was genuine. Sofia asked why he then helped confiscate her passport instead of defending the marriage he supposedly wanted. Jian had no answer beyond fear, debt, family responsibility, and the language of obligation he used for years. For the first time, Sofia saw him without hatred for several seconds, only as a weak man who made catastrophic choices. That recognition did not produce forgiveness. It simply prevented Jian from remaining larger than reality inside her mind. Before leaving, Jian looked at the ledger and quietly warned Sofia that Chang had started checking household documents more carefully. He did not ask what she planned, and Sofia did not tell him, but something had shifted between them. Jian was still responsible for her captivity, yet his certainty about the family system had finally begun collapsing. Sofia told Kai about the encounter, expecting him to insist they move the ledger immediately. Instead, Kai asked what Sofia believed Jian might do next, leaving the judgment with the person who knew him best. She answered that Jian wanted redemption without paying its full cost, which made him unpredictable rather than trustworthy. Kai agreed, and increased precautions without demanding Sofia treat his eldest brother as either enemy or ally. Their escape plan expanded from leaving the courtyard into an extraction requiring documents, evidence, money, transportation, and international help. Sofia insisted Elena and Mateo's birth and medical records travel with them because identity could become another battlefield afterward. She also wanted photographs of every ledger page in case the original disappeared before authorities saw it. Kai secretly copied Sofia's passport when Shulin removed it for a township registration form. He photographed household registration papers and several documents concerning the children before returning everything to the safe. Sofia reviewed every image and created a mental checklist more detailed than any hotel audit she completed in Mexico. Her passport remained in Shulin's safe, Mayu carried the daytime keys, and Shang controlled most of the household cash. Kai knew the family truck well enough to repair it, while Bo usually kept the motorcycle filled with fuel. The village bus remained unreliable, making the truck their best chance if departure happened suddenly or during bad weather. They identified 3 routes downhill, 2 police locations, 1 hospital, and the forestry checkpoint near the paved highway. Sofia also prepared for failure, dividing Marisol's number between Elena's clothing label and a hidden paper inside her necklace pouch. If Sofia were separated from the children, someone examining their belongings might still discover a connection outside China. The thought of separation terrified her enough to lose sleep, but preparation required imagining possibilities she desperately hated. Meanwhile, Shulin became increasingly obsessed with another pregnancy, believing Mateo's birth had not fulfilled agreements among his sons. Chang began marking the old calendar again, and Sofia discovered another blank ledger row carrying Bo's initials. She confronted Jian privately and demanded he explain whether the family intended to continue until each brother received a child. Jian admitted Shulin considered that arrangement fair, although growing conflict among the brothers made enforcement increasingly difficult. Sofia laughed without humor because fairness had become the word this family used whenever distributing pieces of somebody else. She told Jian there would be no next pregnancy, regardless of what Shulin wrote, promised, threatened, or calculated. Jian warned resistance could become dangerous, and Sofia asked whether he understood how dangerous compliance already proved. Later that week, Bo cornered Kai beside the storage room and accused him of secretly preventing the family schedule from functioning. Kai denied nothing, and their argument became loud enough that Sofia heard furniture strike the wall. Bo emerged with a split lip, while Kai carried bruising across one cheek but refused to explain further. Shulin ordered Kai to spend several nights at a relative's house, hoping distance would weaken his alliance with Sofia. Instead, Kai used the separation to reach the township and send copies of ledger photographs to an encrypted account. He also contacted a number Marisol provided through a brief message once she reached Mexican consular representatives. The first reply asked Sofia to confirm identifying information that only she and her family in Mexico would know. Kai memorized the questions rather than carrying written evidence back into the village. Sofia answered through another ridge trip, giving childhood details, passport history, relatives' names, and the Veracruz hotel address. For the first time, she knew officials outside the valley had formally connected her voice to the missing woman Marisol described. The response instructed her to prioritize immediate safety and avoid confronting the household if she believed retaliation was possible. That advice sounded almost painfully simple after years spent living inside the exact danger officials now warned about. Still, knowing someone had officially recorded her existence changed Sofia's posture enough that Mayu noticed. "You look happy," Mayu said one morning, watching Sofia prepare Mateo's breakfast beside the stove. Sofia answered that Elena had slept through the night, offering an ordinary explanation the older woman readily accepted. Inside, Sofia felt the first dangerous spark of anticipation she had allowed herself since the failed escape. Weeks passed while authorities attempted locating the village precisely enough to coordinate without alerting the family. The delay became unbearable, but Sofia understood international assistance moved differently from a person running down a mountain road. Then, Jian received an unexpected telephone call from somebody in the city where he previously worked. Sofia watched his face change before he carried the phone outside and spoke beyond everyone else's hearing. That evening, Shulin summoned all 5 sons into the kitchen while Mayu ordered Sofia upstairs unusually early. Sofia waited until footsteps settled, then moved beside the floor vent where conversations downstairs carried clearly. She heard Mexico, consulate, police, passport, and Jian's increasingly angry voice repeating Sofia's name. Marisol had succeeded, but the Huang family now knew somebody outside the valley was asking questions about Sofia. Relief lasted only seconds because discovery meant the household would tighten before help could possibly arrive. Shulin ordered the gate locked continuously, while Chiang collected phones and inspected bedrooms for evidence of outside communication. Kai barely reached the storage shed before Bo began searching tools, walls, cabinets, and old electrical boxes. He removed the hidden phone and carried it beneath his shirt until darkness offered a safer location. Sofia stayed close to the children, pretending confusion, while Jian repeatedly demanded whether she contacted anyone. "You told my family I was mentally unstable," Sofia replied. "Maybe you should decide whether you believe anything I say." Jian grabbed her arm before releasing it immediately when Kai entered the room and stared at his hand. The brothers exchanged no words, but something final passed between them during that silent confrontation. Qing became convinced Kai was involved and began following his youngest brother whenever he left the courtyard. The next morning, Kai deliberately traveled toward an abandoned field, allowing Chang to follow while Sofia searched another room. She discovered Shulin had moved her passport from the safe into a locked metal box beneath his bed. The change complicated everything because the original safe key Kai copied would no longer be enough. Sofia also found Elena's clinic records missing, suggesting somebody had begun preparing to move documents elsewhere. At dinner, Shulin announced that Sofia and the children might soon visit relatives in another province for several months. Jian looked surprised, proving even he had not known about the plan before his father spoke. Sofia understood immediately that visit meant disappearance before authorities reached the village. She kept eating while Kai's expression hardened across the table, neither of them daring to react. Afterward, Jian followed Sofia upstairs and admitted Shulin intended moving her deeper inland within several days. "You need to tell the police," Sofia replied, refusing to congratulate him for revealing a danger his family created. Jian said officers might not believe him without exposing everything, and Sofia answered that exposure was precisely what honesty required. He left looking defeated, while Sofia realized the family's timeline had finally become shorter than the authorities' timeline. That night, Kai told her waiting for an organized rescue was no longer safe enough. Sofia agreed, but she refused immediate flight until every child document and as much evidence as possible was secured. They needed one opportunity when Shulin, Chiang, and Bo were distracted simultaneously, something the household rarely provided. The opportunity arrived through Shulin himself when he summoned relatives to discuss moving Sofia before officials could interfere. Men entered and left the courtyard throughout the afternoon, creating confusion around keys, vehicles, food, and sleeping arrangements. Sofia listened from the kitchen and realized several relatives openly supported taking her somewhere authorities could not locate. Others sounded uncomfortable but never challenged Shulin directly, repeating the same silence Sofia witnessed throughout the village. Kai whispered that the family planned to move her in 48 hours. Sofia answered that they would leave before sunrise the following morning, transforming years of planning into an exact deadline. Kai asked whether she was certain, and Sofia reminded him certainty was a luxury captivity had never offered. They spent the evening behaving normally while every ordinary action carried the possibility of being their final one inside the house. Sofia bathed Elena and Mateo, braided Elena's hair, and placed both children in clothing suitable for rain. She hid copied documents beneath Mateo's jacket lining and tucked emergency cash inside the waistband of her own trousers. Kai moved 2 fuel containers beneath rice sacks near the truck and checked the battery without opening the hood visibly. Their plan required Mayu's key ring, Shulin's metal box key, the truck keys, original documents, and the red ledger. At midnight, rain began tapping the roof, gradually becoming a heavy storm that swallowed quieter sounds inside the courtyard. Shulin drank more than usual with visiting relatives before everyone finally separated into rooms and temporary sleeping spaces. Shortly after 2, Mayu entered Sofia's room and announced the family schedule would resume immediately rather than after relocation. She listed the brothers according to nights, emphasizing that Sofia's resistance had already caused enough embarrassment for everyone. When Mayu left, Sofia locked the door and held the hummingbird necklace until her breathing settled. Footsteps gathered downstairs as Bo complained, Jian argued, and Qing demanded Kai return from the room where relatives slept. Then Shulin announced beginning the following week, Sofia would no longer remain primarily under Jian's responsibility. The original rotation would be enforced openly, and disobedience from any son would affect future inheritance. Kai stood and refused, triggering an argument violent enough that Sofia heard a chair overturn before Mayu shouted for everyone to stop. Shulin struck Kai across the mouth and ordered him outside until he decided whether families still meant anything. Minutes later, footsteps climbed the side corridor, and Sofia saw Kai through the narrow opening beside her locked door. Rainwater covered his hair and blood remained at the corner of his mouth, but his voice stayed controlled. Through the narrow opening, Kai repeated the same promise Sofia had heard before, and this time she finally understood why. For several seconds, Sofia stared at him because escape had been promised before, and betrayal taught her to distrust hope. "What changed?" she asked, and Kai explained Qing planned to move her before officials could locate them. The old question had been answered, but a larger one replaced it immediately. Leave now, or disappear somewhere nobody knew. Sofia told Kai they would not leave without both children, documents, ledger evidence, and enough money to survive. Kai nodded because he understood that helping Sofia meant following her decisions instead of replacing them. They had less than 4 hours before dawn, while every useful object remained inside rooms controlled by different relatives. Sofia began with Mayu, deliberately waking her and asking for medicine because Mateo's cough had worsened during the storm. While Mayu searched downstairs, Sofia slipped the older woman's coat from a peg and removed the keyring. She passed it to Kai near the dark hallway before returning the coat exactly where Mayu left it. Kai entered Shulin's room while Sofia remained outside, listening for movement from stairs and neighboring bedrooms. The key to the metal box was not on Mayu's ring, forcing Kai to search beneath Shulin's folded clothing. Sofia heard somebody moving downstairs and nearly abandoned the attempt before Kai finally emerged, holding a tiny brass key. The metal box contained Sofia's passport, children's medical documents, cash envelopes, and papers she had never seen. Her hand shook when she touched the blue Mexican passport because the photograph belonged to someone who still trusted Gian. Sofia took her identification, Elena and Mateo's records, emergency money, and copies of every document that might establish identity. She also removed the original red ledger before replacing unrelated papers so the container would not immediately appear empty. The ledger felt heavier than its pages justified, carrying years of calculations that transformed Sofia's body into household property. At 3:45, Kai moved fuel into the truck while rain covered mechanical sounds from the courtyard. Sofia wrapped both children beneath blankets, telling Elena they were going somewhere important and she needed to remain quiet. Elena was old enough to recognize fear, but young enough to trust her mother without demanding explanation. Everything remained on schedule until Gian stepped from the kitchen and found Sofia standing beside the truck with Mateo. For a long moment, neither spoke, while rain streamed from the roof between them like a moving curtain. Gian looked toward the open gate, packed bag, and Kai crouched near the truck's fuel tank. "You are leaving," Gian said in Spanish, sounding less surprised than Sofia expected after years of watching resistance. "I left you the morning you helped your father keep my passport," Sofia answered. "Tonight I leave this place." Gian asked whether she intended taking his daughter and son away permanently, exposing possessions still embedded inside his language. "They are my children too," Sofia replied. "Neither will grow up believing another person can be owned." Gian moved toward the house as though considering calling Shulin, but Sofia raised the red ledger where he could see. "If you wake them, this goes to every authority my family can reach," Sofia warned. "Every payment and every date." Gian stared at the book, finally recognizing that the woman he believed isolated spent years building evidence around them. "You planned this with Kai," he whispered, but Sofia corrected him before that misunderstanding could become comfortable. "I planned this," Sofia said. Kai finally decided whether he wanted to remain part of the cage. Gian looked toward his youngest brother, who stood beside the truck without apologizing or lowering his eyes. "You would destroy your family for her?" Gian asked, and Kai answered with the calmest voice Sofia ever heard. "No. We destroyed ourselves when we decided being poor gave us the right to destroy somebody else." Gian remained motionless, and Sofia realized part of him had been waiting years for another brother to say those words. He could have shouted, "Awaken Shulin," or physically blocked the gate before the children entered the truck. Instead, Gian stepped away from the gate, making the first useful choice he had freely made since Sofia entered the village. Sofia did not forgive him, and that decision erased nothing, but it removed one final obstacle between her and freedom. Kai started the truck while Sofia climbed inside with Elena and Mateo pressed safely against her beneath blankets. They crossed the courtyard threshold at 4:12, years after Sofia first believed the same gate welcomed her. The mountain road was nearly invisible beneath rain, forcing Kai to drive slowly while headlights revealed mud across curves. Sofia kept watching behind them, expecting another vehicle each time darkness opened between trees and rocky slopes. For 20 minutes, nothing followed, and then two distant headlights emerged near the upper bend behind the truck. Bo and Chang had discovered them, turning the narrow mountain road into the final barrier between Sofia and the highway. Kai accelerated where the road widened, but Sofia warned him not to turn escape into a crash, endangering the children. The pursuing vehicle gained ground on straight sections, then lost distance whenever deep mud forced both drivers toward hillsides. Sofia opened the red ledger and removed several photographed pages, placing originals inside separate pockets of her clothing. "If they stop us, they do not get all the evidence back at once." she explained while dividing documents. Kai told her an old forestry checkpoint stood several kilometers ahead, where workers sometimes remained overnight during heavy storms. The checkpoint building appeared dark, but a government road vehicle stood beneath a covered structure beside the lane. Sofia told Kai to stop directly across the road rather than attempting to drive past toward the highway. The pursuing truck appeared seconds later, forcing Bo to brake when Kai positioned their vehicle between concrete barriers. Sofia climbed out holding her passport above her head while shouting for police in every language she could manage. Lights switched on inside the checkpoint building, and two startled workers emerged as Bo and Kwang approached through rain. Chiang immediately claimed Sofia was mentally unstable and being taken somewhere by Kai against the family's wishes. This time, Sofia understood enough Mandarin to answer before another person could define her story on her behalf. She gave her full name, nationality, passport number, children's names, and said she had been held without consent. Then Sofia opened the red ledger beneath the checkpoint light and showed entries connecting Jian's travel and family payments. Bo tried taking the book, but one worker stepped between them, while another called township police by radio. For the first time, a stranger did not return Sofia to the Huang family simply because a Huang man spoke first. Chiang realized the situation had changed and attempted convincing Kai to leave before authorities arrived. Kai refused, knowing staying might expose him to family retaliation and permanent separation from the village. Sofia looked at him and understood his decision finally crossed the line between guilt and genuine personal cost. Police reached the checkpoint almost 40 minutes later, followed by another vehicle carrying officials Sofia could not immediately identify. The questioning lasted hours, and Sofia repeated the same account until exhaustion made every sentence feel detached from her body. An officer initially called the situation a family dispute until Sofia placed her passport and ledger directly before him. She demanded contact with Mexican representatives and repeated that she never consented to losing her freedom. Kai supported her account without minimizing his family's actions, even when officers warned his statements could implicate relatives. By afternoon, news of the investigation reached the village, and Shulin arrived furious enough that officers blocked him physically. Mayu cried for the grandchildren while Jian stood behind her looking years older than he had the previous morning. Sofia allowed none of them to approach Elena or Mateo until officials clarified where she and the children would stay. When Jian requested a private conversation, Sofia refused because secrecy had protected him long enough during their marriage. He apologized in front of police, siblings, parents, and strangers, admitting he knew his family intended shared control. Sofia listened without interrupting, but she did not provide the absolution Jian seemed to expect after finally speaking truth. Confession is not the same thing as repair, she told him. You will have to live with what you chose. The words closed something inside Sofia more effectively than anger because she no longer needed Jian to understand everything. Her future would not depend on whether the man who betrayed her eventually developed enough conscience to regret it. The following weeks unfolded through interviews, temporary housing, medical examinations, paperwork, translation, and repeated identity verification. Mexican representatives became involved after Marisol's report connected with the checkpoint case, confirming Sofia had been actively sought. The investigation widened after officials examined the red ledger and discovered financial links Sofia memorized years earlier. Not every suspicion became a charge, and not every person involved admitted what happened inside the Huang household. The village's silence fractured slowly, with neighbors finally describing arguments, locked gates, and Sofia's earlier attempts to seek help. The elderly vegetable seller admitted noticing signs of distress but said fear of Shulin's relatives kept her silent. Sofia felt anger hearing the explanation, yet understood how systems survived when ordinary fear accumulated across many people. The clinic nurse, who once documented Sofia's request, provided records showing concerns had been raised before the final escape. Those records mattered deeply because they proved Sofia's story did not begin only after the household was exposed. Kai gave investigators everything he knew, including conversations occurring before Sofia arrived and decisions made afterward. His cooperation meant he could no longer safely return home even before formal consequences reached the remaining family. When Sofia asked whether he regretted helping her, Kai answered without expecting praise or affection in return. I regret waiting years before becoming the person who should have opened that gate on your first morning. Sofia believed him because the answer centered his failure rather than presenting eventual courage as something heroic. She still refused to promise him a future because freedom meant recovering the right to make decisions without obligation. Kai accepted that boundary, saying whatever happened between them later could not become payment for what he finally did. Several months passed before officials approved Sofia and the children to travel while legal proceedings continued through complicated channels. Her return flight to Mexico felt less like triumph than crossing a threshold her body did not completely trust. Elena slept against Sofia's shoulder while Mateo pressed his face to the airplane window as clouds covered the mountains. Kai remained in China to cooperate with investigators, while Sofia returned home without tying her freedom to any future relationship. Whatever existed between Sofia and Kai had grown inside captivity, and Sofia refused carrying that relationship directly into freedom. At the airport, Kai handed her the hummingbird necklace after repairing a clasp damaged during the final chaotic weeks. Sofia had forgotten telling him the clasp was loose, but he remembered without turning the repair into a farewell performance. "You opened the gate," Sofia told him, touching the silver bird resting once again against her throat. Kai shook his head gently. "You spent years walking toward it. I only stopped standing in your way." That answer remained with Sofia during the long flight across the Pacific and every difficult month afterward. Marisol met them in Mexico City with Sofia's cousins, holding Elena and Mateo as though contact could recover lost years. Sofia cried only after recognizing familiar Spanish everywhere, because safety finally allowed emotions survival had postponed. Returning home did not magically repair everything, and Sofia quickly learned freedom could coexist with nightmares, anger, grief, and uncertainty. She struggled with crowded rooms, locked doors, unexpected footsteps, and anyone touching personal documents without asking permission. For months, she slept with her passport inside a bedside drawer, then checked repeatedly each morning that it remained there. Marisol never laughed about the habit, even when Sofia admitted she understood nobody in Mexico intended taking it. Therapy helped slowly, while work gave Sofia something familiar to rebuild through numbers that remained predictable when memories did not. She returned first to bookkeeping part-time because full hotel shifts surrounded by strangers became overwhelming. Her old manager offered an office near an exit without asking Sofia to explain why the location mattered. Elena initially feared men raising their voices, while Mateo cried whenever Sofia disappeared behind a closed bathroom door. Sofia worried her children carried memories they could not yet describe, making their healing inseparable from her own. She found a counselor experienced with children and learned recovery could require patience rather than constant visible progress. Some nights Elena asked about Gian, and Sofia answered carefully without turning her daughter into a judge of adults. She explained that Gian was her biological father and also a man who made choices that hurt their family. Sofia promised Elena she could ask questions whenever she wanted and did not need to inherit her mother's feelings. Mateo was younger and remembered less, yet he developed an unusual attachment to the hummingbird necklace around Sofia's neck. Whenever he became frightened, he touched the tiny silver wings exactly as Sofia once did during captivity. The gesture hurt Sofia initially, then became another reminder that symbols could carry comfort without carrying ownership. Legal updates from China arrived irregularly and often contained less certainty than Sofia wanted. Some relatives faced investigation and other consequences, while disputed evidence made parts of the case difficult to resolve cleanly. Sofia learned justice moved through documents, jurisdictions, witnesses, and definitions far less emotionally satisfying than escaping through a gate. She stopped expecting court decisions to return the years taken from her and focused on protecting the life still ahead. The red ledger remained with investigators for a long period, but Sofia kept digital copies of every photographed page. One afternoon, she opened them for the first time since returning and found the empty rows beneath Mateo's entry. Her body reacted before thought, tightening with the memory of realizing the family expected more children. Sofia closed the file and spent the evening walking the Veracruz seawall until the sound of water steadied her breathing. The next day, she reopened the photographs with her therapist present and described each column like an accountant explaining fraud. Numbers that once defined her captivity became evidence she could analyze from a safe room thousands of kilometers away. That transformation became important enough that Sofia eventually volunteered with an organization supporting women navigating coercive international relationships. She never introduced herself by describing every detail of what happened in the Huang house. Instead, she taught women to preserve documents, memorize numbers, maintain outside contacts, and recognize control hidden beneath apparent protection. Sofia never called herself a woman rescued by a good man from a bad family. She told people information mattered, preparation mattered, allies mattered, and their own judgment must remain central whenever possible. Kai wrote occasionally through Marisol during the first year, never asking Sofia to return or demanding emotional recognition. He found work repairing industrial equipment in Guangzhou after investigators advised against immediately returning to the village. His messages focused on practical updates, legal developments, and photographs of ordinary streets where nobody knew the Huang family. Sofia answered rarely at first because she needed to discover who she was without Kai occupying every moment. Sometimes weeks passed before she replied, and Kai never sent a second message asking why she remained silent. That patience mattered because Sofia had spent years surrounded by men treating access to her attention like an entitlement. After nearly a year, Kai sent a short message saying Shulin had asked whether Sofia would ever forgive the family. Sofia stared at the question, then answered that forgiveness was not a group decision and might never happen. Kai replied only that he understood and would not carry messages from Shulin again unless Sofia requested them. Kai respected that boundary without testing it again, and to Sofia, that consistency mattered more than another apology. 2 years after returning home, Sofia received a photograph showing a small silver hummingbird painted above Kai's repair shop door. The image annoyed her before it moved her, because symbols could become sentimental shortcuts when people ignored the work behind them. She called Kai that evening and told him exactly that, causing him to laugh for the first time she remembered. Their conversation lasted 3 hours and contained no promises, only 2 people meeting outside the emergency that shaped them. Kai told Sofia he started therapy after realizing leaving his family did not automatically undo what their values created inside him. He spoke about control, obedience, masculinity, shame, and how easily silence allowed violence to become normal. Sofia listened without becoming his counselor, another boundary both of them had learned to respect. When he asked about Elena and Mateo, Sofia answered only what she felt comfortable sharing and noticed he never pushed. Their calls became monthly, then occasionally weekly, depending on work, children, moods, and ordinary life. Nothing dramatic announced the return of affection because Sofia no longer trusted relationships built entirely from dramatic circumstances. She wanted to know who Kai was when nobody needed rescuing, nobody was hiding, and no gate stood between them. Months later, Kai applied for permission to visit Mexico, arranging his own accommodation rather than assuming Sofia would host him. When approval arrived, he sent the dates and told Sofia she could decide whether they met at all. Sofia surprised herself by feeling excited instead of trapped when she read the message. She met Kai in a public cafe overlooking the Veracruz seawall where Jian once proposed during another summer storm. Kai recognized the location immediately but did not mention Jian until Sofia chose to bring the subject into conversation. She asked whether he understood why loving him once seemed impossible even after he helped her escape. Kai answered that affection created during captivity could never become trustworthy unless Sofia had complete freedom to reject it afterward. That was the first moment Sofia allowed herself to consider what existed between them might survive outside the Huang house. They walked along the seawall afterward while Elena and Mateo stayed with Marisol for the afternoon. Sofia noticed Kai kept several steps away whenever pedestrians narrowed the path, allowing her rather than guiding her automatically. It was such a small behavior that another person might never notice, which was exactly why Sofia noticed immediately. During the visit, Kai rented a small apartment and spent several days exploring Veracruz alone rather than attaching himself to Sofia. They met for dinner, visited markets, argued about music, and discovered they disagreed strongly about how spicy food should be. Ordinary disagreement became strangely precious because nobody locked doors afterward or summoned relatives to enforce obedience. Kai eventually returned to China, and Sofia experienced sadness without confusing sadness with a command to change her life. They continued long distance for more than a year before discussing whether living in the same country made practical sense. Sofia refused to relocate anywhere she could become dependent on Kai for language, employment, transportation, or immigration status. Kai accepted the condition immediately and began exploring work opportunities in Mexico instead of asking Sofia to compromise. He eventually secured a position with an equipment company servicing industrial refrigeration systems near Veracruz and Mexico City. The irony made Sofia laugh because refrigeration machinery had indirectly brought Jian into her life years earlier. Kai moved into his own apartment and kept finances completely separate while their relationship developed at Sofia's pace. He built relationships with Elena and Mateo slowly, never asking either child to call him anything specific. Elena remembered him carrying her through snow but also remembered enough of China to associate him with frightening years. Kai never demanded she separate him from those memories before she was ready. When Elena became angry one evening and accused him of belonging to the family that hurt her mother, Kai agreed. He told her he had belonged to that household, remained silent too long, and understood why she might never forget. Sofia watched from the kitchen and realized Kai did not ask Elena to comfort him after telling the truth. Mateo formed a bond differently, following Kai whenever he repaired appliances and asking endless questions about tools and machines. Kai answered patiently while still directing important decisions back towards Sofia whenever the children tried bypassing their mother. Years later, Mateo asked why Kai left his family in China, and Sofia allowed Kai to answer honestly. "I waited too long before doing what was right," Kai told him. "Your mother showed me courage, requires action." Sofia corrected him gently afterward, reminding Kai she never existed to become the lesson that improved another man. Kai accepted the correction with the humility that first separated him from every other Huang brother. Their relationship survived because correction no longer threatened love, and disagreement no longer threatened anyone's freedom. Marriage eventually entered conversation, but Sofia rejected the idea twice before understanding why the question frightened her so deeply. The legal words still carried Jian's voice, missing documents, locked gates, and a ring that once felt like evidence. Kai told her they never needed marriage for him to consider their partnership real. Months passed before Sofia raised the subject herself, which changed the emotional meaning completely. This time marriage would not transport her somewhere unknown or transfer authority from one family to another. Sofia selected the courthouse, witnesses, financial agreement, and simple restaurant where everyone would eat afterward. Kai handled his own paperwork and showed Sofia every document before submitting anything involving their shared future. No family ledger recorded the marriage, and nobody contributed money expecting ownership of either person standing before the judge. Sofia kept her surname, her own accounts, her own passport, and the hummingbird necklace resting against her dress. After the ceremony, Kai asked whether she wanted him to carry her passport while she held Mateo's jacket and Elena's flowers. Sofia smiled, placed the document inside her own bag, and told him she would carry it herself. Kai laughed and answered, "Of course you will," without interpreting independence as rejection or love as surrender. The moment was small enough that nobody else understood why Sofia stood completely still afterward. For 1 second, she remembered the upstairs room in China and the empty suitcase where her passport should have been. Then Elena called her from the courthouse steps, and Sofia returned to the life standing openly before her. Years had passed since she entered the mountain courtyard, believing marriage meant joining another person without disappearing inside them. She could not recover every stolen year, and justice never arrived as completely or cleanly as stories sometimes promise. Some members of the Huang family faced consequences, while other parts of the case remained complicated by evidence and jurisdiction. Jian eventually sent a letter through legal channels asking permission to communicate with Elena when she became older. Sofia did not decide for her daughter and instead preserved the letter until Elena reached an age suitable for making that choice. Elena chose to wait, and Sofia respected that choice without pushing her toward either reconciliation or rejection. The decision mattered because the Huang house once taught Sofia how destructive families became when choice belonged only to elders. Sofia learned closure did not require every person who harmed her to understand exactly what they had taken. Closure sometimes meant waking beside an unlocked door and knowing nobody outside had the right to decide whether it opened. It meant children growing without being assigned to adults according to debts, inheritance, gender expectations, or a red ledger. It meant loving Kai because she could leave him, disagree with him, refuse him, and still remain completely safe. On the 10th anniversary of her return to Mexico, Sofia took Elena and Mateo to the Veracruz seawall before sunrise. The children watched hummingbirds dart between flowering shrubs while Kai carried breakfast several meters behind them. Elena asked why Sofia always touched the necklace whenever airplanes, locked doors, or mountain roads entered conversation. Sofia explained her grandmother once said hummingbirds survived by knowing when to fight wind and when to disappear inside it. For years, Sofia believed survival meant becoming harder than everything that tried to break her. Eventually, she understood survival could also mean remaining soft enough to love without surrendering ownership of herself. She had crossed an ocean believing another family would decide where she belonged for the rest of her life. Now Sofia looked toward the Gulf of Mexico with both children beside her and morning sunlight warming her face. The gate was thousands of kilometers away, but its final lock disappeared long before any court completed the case. It disappeared when Sofia stopped asking whether the Huang family would ever return what they had taken from her. Her name, choices, children, future, and body had never belonged inside their red ledger to begin with. Sofia touched the hummingbird once, lowered her hand, and walked toward the people she had freely chosen as family.